And welcome back, Maranatha Bible Church. We are meeting again from the TES room upstairs. There is some fantastic renovation and upgrading going on downstairs in the sanctuary right now. So we weren't able to meet down there, but we did get to meet on there on Tuesday. So we're thankful to be able to show you a little different venue. Just wanted to say good afternoon and hope you guys are doing well. And just take a moment to give you some more books. I know you guys are probably dying to get more. And so we just wanted to give you a little something that you could probably read, during this time. So Joe, if you want to start.
Sure. The big book I picked today was a very, really easy read. Just kidding. It's The Mortification of Sin by John Owen. Just on the back it says, in this classic, Owen effectively dismisses various excuses for not engaging in self-scrutiny, and yet avoids the current trend of self-absorption. In so doing, he provides principles to help believers live lives of holiness. So just kind of another, in the theme that's, we kind of been talking about a little bit of holiness. This is just another great resource. Sometimes with Owen, you'll have to read the paragraph once or twice.
Or six or seven.
Exactly. Well, I was being generous. I didn't want to scare him away, but it's a great read. It's not a very thick book, but it will take a while to really read and understand, but it's great. So I would recommend it.
I think I mentioned this last week sometime, but Treasure Principle by Randy Alcorn is a little book that we went through recently as a family, just at dinner time. It took us maybe 5 nights to read through it. Very short, but really good. Subtitled Discovering the Secret of Joyful Giving. And just wanted to help our kids and our family to remind ourselves, number one, that God owns everything. We don't own it. Number two, we're stewards of what God has given us. And number three, that we need to invest in the kingdom with our financial resources. And so, Jesus talked more about money than heaven and hell combined. And so that tells us a little bit about the importance of that topic. And so this is a little book, just a really helpful resource to help you think strategically and wisely and biblically and have a kingdom mindset when it comes to finances and how to use the Lord's resources that he's given you. So if you just need a quick reminder and a quick refresh on how to use money to the glory of God, this would be a great book to start with.
Yeah, cool. So I grabbed R.C. Sproul, Surprised by Suffering, if you can see that. And he does this wonderful job. There's several books out there on the biblical perspective of suffering. And this is one of my favorites. I've gone to a couple different times. And he, in the front here, he talks about our hope for a future life, fate of the stillborn and suicides, our divine calling to suffering and death, images of heaven and what they mean, terminal illnesses, euthanasia, experiences that people have had. And so he really does an excellent job of taking a lot of our experiences that we may have or our unbiblical thoughts and kind of filtering them down into scripture. And so it does give us a biblical perspective and a great worldview on what suffering is. And so if it's something, I did a teaching series on it many years ago, and it was something that really blessed me. So I'd really encourage you guys, if it's something you struggle with, suffering in general, then, pick it up and see if Sproul can answer some of your questions. So just some books for you guys. Next week, I want to bring some devotions. So during this time, maybe you've never done a daily devotion. So I was thinking today, maybe it'd be nice, we could just bring something for them to read on a daily basis. I know Todd's already encouraged you a proverb a day. Keeps the lack of wisdom away. I just saw that one.
That was good.
Thanks.
Wow.
I appreciate that.
That was really good.
I was trying to think of a Christian way to say lack of wisdom.
Joe's cringing over here.
So you could 31 Proverbs. You guys can do the math. So anyway, this afternoon, we're still talking about the church and why we want to get back together as a church. But before we jump into that, going around online, I like to myself read various blogs and listen to various sermons. And one of the things that seems to be coming up is there's this rift that's being created between Bible churches, God-fearing evangelical churches. And there are some churches, and that rift is because there are some churches right now, even in Michigan, that are meeting. They're having Sunday services, and they're coming together in their church building though they are practicing various social distancing disciplines and other things, but they are still meeting. And so I just wanted to take a moment, have us kind of talk through again why we've decided not to meet as a church. One of the main reasons is, we know that it's still the law. Though in her executive order, the governor has said that churches will not be prosecuted, but it doesn't say that it's not against the law. And so I just wanted to maybe reassure some of you guys, reiterate a little bit about why we've chosen to take that path. So if you guys want to just kind of talk that out.
Yeah, we've talked about this as staff and elders, and just trying to really wrestle through that issue. As Bob just said, technically we could meet as a church and not be penalized for it, but we have decided not to, as probably 98% of the churches, 99% of the churches in the country have, for a few reasons. Number one, we do believe we're under a Romans 13, 1 Peter 2, Titus 3 situation. This is not an Acts 5:29 issue where we're asked to disobey the scriptures. That's not the situation that we are in. We're not the Hebrew midwives who are being asked to kill babies. We're not Daniel, who's being told not to pray. We're not Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego told to bow down to a false god. We're not in any of those situations. So there's no asterisk behind Romans 13 or 1 Peter 2 or Titus 3 about when you obey the government and when you don't, except for, if we're being asked to do something that's sinful. So we do believe we need to obey our governing authorities. And so that's probably the main reason why. Secondly, we do want to be a witness in our community. And so we're just thinking about the fact that if we were to gather together and there's 50 cars, 60 cars, 100 cars out in our parking lot, what does that say about us to our community? What does it say about our desire to honor authority? And so there's an element of our testimony in our city and our neighborhood. And so we want to be careful about our witness. And that's the second reason. A third reason would just be, we just don't want to get anyone sick. And so while nobody has gotten it so far that we know of in our church, we just want to be careful about that. And so those would be, I guess, the three reasons why we've chosen to not meet. Even though technically we could, we want to abide by those principles for now.
Yeah, I would just say when we read these passages like Romans 13 and 1 Peter and those passages, we need to remember the circumstances that Paul was under when he wrote these. Who was the leader at that point when he's talking about these things? When he's saying to obey the government, be subject to the governing authorities, he's talking about guys like Nero or later Diocletian, these guys who were murdering Christians wholesale. And we know nothing of that. And he's telling them to submit. So we really have, if we think about it that way, this really isn't that big of a deal, for us to just obey. Even though we're allowed to meet, let's just obey what they're telling us to do, unless it gets to the point where they're just focusing in on churches, or everything else is able to meet, but if we don't want churches to meet, then that's a different story. But right now, that's not the case. So
I'll tell you, it's hard though, because we're sitting here. You all on that side of Facebook can't see it, but we're sitting here in front of chairs with pictures of our church people. Actually, they're staring at us. So there's
barbers.
The barbers are over there, yeah, and the Yikomoffs are over there, and the Wests are over there, and my son with his mouth wide open is back there. I mentioned
the leagues are back.
Leagues are back there,
of course. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just hard. We want to be together with you, and our hearts are just aching to be back together with you. So it's not for lack of desire by any means.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I think the point we really need to remember is that our government, our local, our state government, hasn't come out against churches at all. In fact, it's been one of the most lenient. They've even allowed, like we said, to gather without fear of any repercussion. But they have asked that for this time that we don't. So I think that's key. They're not striking out against any faith-based, I think is how it actually says. So that's good. So then the other thing is, there's going to come a time when we come back together, right? It's inevitable. We are going to meet again. It may seem like a long process, but we're going to look back and perhaps not laugh, but at least we'll think it was just a short time when we couldn't meet. And so we have been, as elders, speaking through what that's going to look like when we do have the opportunity to get back together. And we just wanted to share some initial thoughts, some preliminary thoughts. Obviously, we want to make the extreme point that we don't know when that day is going to be. We are as hopeful as you are, but we can't say, hey, I talked to the governor yesterday and she told me that this is when we're going to meet. Everything is speculative as far as the timeline goes, but I think logically we can deduce a few things. And so we know it's not happening before the 15th. And I think it's also safe to say a couple weeks after that, we have the various phases that they're looking to do. So just want to talk through that with you guys, offer our church some hope that we are in the process of putting some plans together, holding them loosely. I think your sermon talked about that last night, holding these plans loosely, but also holding them hopefully. And so what do you guys want to say to that?
Yeah, we talked about this on Tuesday night as our elders met on Zoom, and we were just actually talking, the three of us, before this call started, that realistically, we don't think we're going to be able to meet together in any sizable fashion, probably before May 31. That's just a guess. Who knows for sure if that's going to happen? But Joe, you mentioned on Tuesday, I think, that the phase one hasn't even started yet. We don't think we're not even in phase one. We're still in lockdown. So if there's a couple of weeks of phase one, which only allows 10 people to meet at a time, if that lasts for a couple of weeks, then the earliest we could meet together with a group of 50 would maybe be May 31 or June 6. So, we're looking at just the calendar and realizing this is a ways out before we reassemble in our normal capacity. So if our guesses are right and the phases are right and just trying to put all that together, tentatively, we talked on Tuesday night about a plan where we would have a group of 50 in the auditorium and a group of 50 up here in the upper level classrooms, separated as much as could be separated. Upper level people would use these restroom facilities here on the upper level. The lower level people in the auditorium would use the restrooms down there. There's a separate entrance in this level. There's a separate entrance for the auditorium. So if that's possible, then conceivably, perhaps around May 31, we could have 100 people meeting here at our church building in two separate locations without mingling together, although those 50 people could actually meet together in their respective rooms. But that's kind of what we're targeting right now. We would clean everything and do everything we can to just facilitate that. But this is all subject to change, but we wanted to at least have something out there that we could address and shoot for. You want to talk a little bit about children's ministry?
Yeah, that's something that would be farther down the road. If we do start meeting together in these separate areas, children's meeting together in their Sunday school classes or the toddler class, that's not going to happen for a while, just because it's almost impossible to keep those kids.
Not almost.
Well, it is impossible to keep those kids apart. So that would be another part of the logistics that we'd have to figure out. Children would have to, stay with their parents for a while until we, at some time when we decide, okay, when the government says now you can, get in closer proximity to one another, and then we'd start to open back up the children's ministry. So that wouldn't take place right away either. That would probably be even farther down the road from when we start meeting back together. But those things we still can't nail down until we know a little bit more about how we're going to start opening things up.
So one of the ideas we had thought as well, when we do meet up, is to obtain the proper distance between souls. So families sitting together and then having chairs set up strategically around, so there's still that kind of distance. So we'd still be able to come in, you'd still be able to sit with your family in a designated row, but then you'd still have the space that is around you that you would you'd be able to be separate from that. So I think it's good we have these things, moving. As we've said, we obviously don't have a start date by any means, but just keep praying, and we're very hopeful that we will be able to gather soon. So with that, why do we want to gather? Why do we want to come back as a church? We talked about this a little bit last week, and this week we're going to talk about spiritual gifts. It's something that most people probably didn't even think about as they weren't gathering as the church. I can imagine most people didn't go home and say, man, I'm not going to be using my gift of giving. I'm not going to use my gift of serving. I'm not, you go through the whole gifts. But you still had those gifts. They didn't go away because you're not in the church. The Lord's not taking them away and putting them on hold until you can come back and gather. And so I just went through, 1 Corinthians 12 and encourage you guys to go there as well. 1 Corinthians 12, 13, 14, and looking at spiritual gifts. And we just want to take next 15 or so minutes and just talk through part of coming back together, that longing that we have coming back together. Once again, as we said last week or on Tuesday, shouldn't be just to have the fellowship. It shouldn't be just to have the milk and cookies or juice and cookies or whatever. But it should be to actually be part of the body of Christ. And part of the body of Christ means that we get to exercise those gifts. So guys, I'll leave it up to you. I'll throw the first pitch out. So why do we even have spiritual gifts? Why did the Lord give us these? Why are we blessed with these?
I would say we're given spiritual gifts to edify the body, and these gifts aren't just for us to build us up. So we're thinking, well, I have this great gift I can use. These gifts were given to edify the body, to glorify Christ. So the only way we can do that is by engaging in those gifts in the body. So Bob said in 1 Corinthians 12, he talks about where would the body be if all the gifts weren't working together? Not the body isn't complete, not just an eye, it's just an eye or just a foot. All the parts working together to have the body work correctly. So that's what I would say. That's why they're important, that we're using them in the body.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one of the reasons we would want to come back together. This whole discussion was kind of prompted by an email we got of why should we want to get back together? Is it just because I want to see people? Yeah, that's part of it, but it's bigger than that. And so what we're trying to do here is flesh out the corporate dynamic to the church that makes it such a special entity that we want to come back together, and all of those unique dynamics that make up the body. And so spiritual gifts is part of that. I was just looking at 1 Corinthians 12, verse 25. It says, so that there be no division in the body, but that the members would have the same concern for each other. So if one member suffers, all the members suffers with it. And if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. That's why we have spiritual gifts, because there's a concern for one another. And we love each other and we care for each other. And when we come together corporately, there's an element of concern that is expressed in the display of those gifts. So if you're a giver, that concern is expressed in how you give. If you're an encourager or an exhorter, that concern is expressed in how you exhort. If you're a mercy person, that concern is expressed in how you give mercy. If you're a teacher, preacher, leader, all of those are expressed in the body, and it's how we express our concern for one another. So that's why we have spiritual gifts. It's to minister to one another. As Joe said, it's for our common edification, for the building up of the body. And as long as we're isolated, that concern for one another cannot be expressed very well. So it can be still, we're still connected through this means and phone calls and emails and texts and all that stuff. But there's a corporate dynamic and element that is unique to when we assemble together and the body functions the way God intended it to. And so that's why we have spiritual gifts. It's to build each other up, to express our concern, to suffer with those who are suffering, to rejoice with those who are rejoicing. And as long as we're separated, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Reading 1 Corinthians 12:7, but to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. And then I think we're missing that, right? We're missing being able to use those gifts. And as he goes on in 1 Corinthians and he says, for even as the body is one and yet has many members, and all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body, so also is Christ. And so like we talked about a bit on Tuesday, you're missing something. Like you should feel that loss. Like you don't have that encourager. I know for myself, just being in the body and talking with the body on Sundays and during the week, like those people that have those gifts, maybe they don't even know they have the gift of encouragement, yet they just so naturally use it. So you feel encouraged. And so some of you are just naturally encouraging people, or administratively gifted, or whatever that gifting is, and you're not able to use that. So not only are you missing out, but as Scripture would say, you're also missing out on blessing the body. And so that's one of the reasons why we should be longing, to get back together. So we know why we have them. And so why should we talk a little bit more, why should we miss using them? And so I know I talked a little bit about that, but why is it that we should be looking forward to using our gifts again?
I think a couple different reasons. One reason is because through using those gifts, we're growing. We're growing as we use these gifts. We're becoming more like Christ, and we see others being blessed by the using of those gifts, and that glorifies Christ. And we should miss that. We don't when we are just. Like Todd said, we can use these gifts now. We are using them through the text and all these various things, but it's just not the same. It's still kind of a plastic or a veneer that just isn't manifest in those kind of actions as much as it is when you're in the body. And if we're just filling up on Scripture and on the Word and not using those gifts, we can begin to be stifled in our Christian walk. So it's just a matter. It's part of it helps us to become more mature. Sanctification, all part of spiritual disciplines. Using your gifts is right in there with that, I would say.
Yeah. I think it goes two ways. There's the reason we should miss it is, number one, for the person who has the gift that can't exercise it, and at the same time, the person who is ministered to by that gift, they should also miss it. So it's a two-way street here. So on the one hand, the person who has the gift, whatever the gift is, let's just call it encouragement. If you have the gift of encouragement, you should miss not using your spiritual gift because you can't exercise it. It's harder when we can't assemble with the body to exercise that gift. It's not impossible, but it's harder. It's more difficult. You know, if you have that gift right now and you're listening, you understand how hard it is and what a challenge it is. And Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights and other times, small groups, those are the times when those gifts are really manifested and really used. And so if you have the gift, you should miss whatever gift you have, you should miss not using it because God has given you that gift for the edification of the body. And if we can't meet, then you can't exercise that body. And so you are lacking in your ability to exercise that gift. On the flip side, the other side of that is we should miss using our gifts because when the body exercises its gifts, obviously it ministers to each one of us. And so if I'm in need of encouragement and I'm able to rub shoulders with someone on Sunday mornings and that person ministers to me, then I'm encouraged, I'm edified, I'm built up, I'm strengthened, I'm made more like Christ, I'm growing in my relationship with the Lord because of your ministry to me. So I think it's a two-way street. And yeah, I think one of the reasons we need to be looking forward to May 31 or whenever it is that we get back together is we finally get to exercise the gifts that God has given to us.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think you guys both said it well. One is that having glorifying God. Like right now, we're not using our gifts to glorify God, and the other one is we're not serving one another. And part of the Christian life is service. Jesus came to serve, and so we're to emulate that as well. And we're not able to do it at the grand scheme. Now, both of you kind of hinted on this a little bit. Making use of our gifts now. Obviously, we're not using them to their fullest potential. And maybe you could talk about part one of the question is, how is it we can utilize those gifts now, even though we're not in a corporate setting? But part number two is that, what if I was at church, I've been coming to Maranatha for X amount of years, and I've never actually exercised spiritual gifts? What kind of advice would you have? So right now is a great time. Try to figure that out. You got two questions. Part one, how can I use the ones I have? Part two is, how do I find out maybe if I don't know if I have any?
Yeah, I would say part one, we've touched on, the different means of social media or texting, phone calls. If that's your spiritual gift. If your spiritual gift is, say, teaching, that's going to be a little more difficult, but you can still, that's something you could do through social media, through Zoom calls or something like that. Or with just basically with your family. You could teach your children, if that's your spiritual gift. But really, that's a gift that needs to be used in the local body under the authority of the church. So maybe that's not the greatest illustration, but there's just different ways you can use it through social media, whatever your spiritual gift may be. If it's giving, you can still do that through snail mail or whatever. That's one way. And what was the second part of the question, Bob?
So if I've been coming to church and I don't know what my gifts are.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would say if when you start coming back to church, the way to find out your gifts is to just start plugging yourself in to things that interest you, and see if there's affirmation perhaps from other people that, hey, you're gifted in this area, or maybe not. Maybe they'll say, maybe this isn't the best area for you. Just start plugging yourself in, and you can begin to see where you're gifted, and those things start to come to the forefront as you use them. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would agree. Get creative now. You can still exercise your gifts. Even though that we can't gather together, we're still the church, right? The church isn't not the church when we're not meeting together. We're still the church. We're still Maranatha Bible Church. The church is not a building. The church is people. And so you can still exercise those gifts. So just get creative. You can figure out how some creative ways are to exercise your gifts. And I would agree with Joe that this is a good time to evaluate. Do you have a good sense of what your spiritual gifts are? And if not, as we come back together, plug yourself in and see where the Lord leads. Yeah, we were kind of joking beforehand about the spiritual gifts inventories, spiritual gifts assessment tests. And honestly, I don't think there's a lot of value. I mean, if you want to take a spiritual gifts test, go ahead. We're not going to send the spiritual gifts police after you to prevent you from doing that. It may help you a little bit, but Joe's right. The best way to figure out your spiritual gift is just plug in. Start serving and see where the Lord leads, and he'll put you right where he wants you. So I think that's some good advice.
I would just add to that, as you do that, though, you have to be teachable and open to, maybe that's not something you really love, you really want to do. You get plugged in there, and maybe that's not really where your spiritual gift is. Be open to that counsel and say, okay, well, that's not my spiritual gift, and that's not where I want to be. Just be very transparent and open to using your spiritual gift, whatever that may be, even if it's something you really want to do, but maybe you're not gifted in that area. Don't get angry about that. Just be open.
Yeah, that's good. I think, using your gifts right now, Joe, I think you hit it well. Teaching your family, having your daily devotions with your wife, your kids. If you're by yourself and you're single and you can sit down and study the word as well. Encouragement, there's tons of means of encouragement now. My wife and I were talking like, man, what if this happened back when, we were in school, in the 90s, and you didn't have anything, right? You didn't have the internet like this. You didn't have video calls. Now my kids, if you make a call without the video, they think something's broken.
You mean the 80s, right?
Oh, no.
I
was 90s. Sorry. Not that far back. That's yeah. My kids asked me what my favorite app was when I was growing up, and I always used to say mozzarella sticks, right? So I think of that, and I think, wow, what a great opportunity we have here to be able to just reach people. Obviously, it's not the same. It's kind of that shadow of things, but at the same time, it does help us to be able to encourage each other. It helps us to be able to talk through things with one another. And so I'd really just encourage you guys to don't set your spiritual gifts aside, whatever they are. Don't say, well, I got to wait till I get back to be with the body. It's not true. I would say you have to wait till you get back with the corporate body for the fullness of those gifts to be used again, perhaps, but certainly not for those gifts to be used. And then I would agree with the assessing your spiritual gifts. I think, I'm not a fan of the spiritual gift test either. Certainly wouldn't put you in spiritual gifts jail or something like that for taking one. The only caution I would have is those things are really geared towards what you like.
Exactly.
So you're filling out a survey based upon the things that you like. Now, that's not to say that your spiritual gifts can't align with what you like. That's not at all. The opposite isn't true. But a lot of times, and I love the advice Joe and Todd both gave, was you just got to start serving. Because what happens is you're starting to serve the people. And as you're serving the people, you're going to see, well, I really love encouraging people, or I really love teaching people, or I really love, whatever that is. I have an administrative gift. So, man, when they ask me to serve, I love going and filing things, or, whatever that looks like for you. But you can't actually sail the ship if you never take it out of the dock. And so I would encourage you that. And even if you've been coming here and you say, I don't know about this spiritual gift thing, you have one, at least. The Bible says we all have at least one. And a lot of them actually work together. So we have two or three. And so don't settle for a less than God-filled spiritual life, because he wants to use you. He wants you to use your gifts to glorify him and to edify the body. So any other thoughts you guys have on gathering back together as the church and spiritual gifts?
just one thought on a spiritual gift. I think sometimes we think a spiritual gift is just one category. Like I'm an administrator and that's it. That's all I got, nothing else. Actually, I think when Paul refers to a spiritual gift, I think he has in mind almost a combination of the gifts that make up your spiritual gift. So in other words, if you think of an artist's palette who's got a multiple different number of colors available, then he can take from this and this and this and kind of mix it together to make one color. I think that's the idea behind spiritual gifts. So God is actually taking all of the spiritual gifts and he's mixing them in proper proportions to each of you individually, and that's your spiritual gift. And so it's not that you're just an administrator. Well, no, you might be an administrator, but you have some of the giving gift and some of the mercy gift as well. And so that is your spiritual gift in combination. So don't think of spiritual gift as just rigid categories. I would say that there's probably this combination and proportions that God, through the Spirit, mixes together for each individual, and that's what makes up your unique gift.
Yeah, I would say even like looking at the gift of teaching, you're also exhorting and you're also encouraging.
Right.
And yeah, so I would absolutely agree. I think that's a really good illustration. So, well, that's it for
Tonight, 7 o'clock.
today. I was going to say, if you want to give a brief announcement on what's going on.
Tonight, 7 o'clock, Zoom will be our NBC family check-in. So please join us for that. Dr. Jerry Ragg will be with us. He's our guest, and he'll be answering some questions, and you'll get a chance to ask him some questions as well. So great opportunity just to see some faces from Maranatha and hear each other's voice and see each other on the screen. So please join us for that. It'll just be an hour from 7 to 8 o'clock with Dr. Ragg, and we hope you can join us for that.
And are we going to have it through our website again?
Oh, yeah, we'll probably live stream that as well. So if you can't get on through the Zoom app, you can watch it on our NBC live stream website page as well.
And then Saturday morning, 9 o'clock, we're going to do a men's Bible study. So it'll be on the Zoom. Paul is sending out an email. So we're going to go through 1 Thessalonians. So just read chapter 1. We'll discuss that. And then that's Saturday morning, 9 a.m. And then Sunday, we have our normal teaching. You'll be in Proverbs. And then we'll do the equipping hour, the biblical counseling after that. So that pretty much wraps up the week. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, it has been a pleasure to be here. We cannot wait to see your actual faces, though we do enjoy seeing the pictures that are staring at us. So hope you guys have a great weekend and enjoy the nice weather that's on the way. So we'll see you guys. We love you. We miss you.